All right, so in this podcast, we're going to mainly talk about ecdysteroids and more specifically turkesterone, because the hype still really hasn't died down. And I think that up until now, there haven't really been many people from the science-based side who are really looking into the mechanisms, mechanisms of turkesterone and the ecdysterone side. But they are used as the main arguments. Because, well, there are no human studies. So I really wanted to understand and explain why people think this supplement could work and if the arguments they use are valid. Now, I think it's important that I didn't just find a random guy on the street and paid him $50 to come on my YouTube channel. So I quickly wanted to ask why should we listen to you, or what type of expertise do you have?
Sure. So I guess I'd start by talking about my experience in the supplement industry. So I've been involved in both formulating and running a dietary supplement company for now over a decade. Prior, it was De Novo Nutrition. Now it's Elemental Formulations. I have no bias. I have no skin in the game. We don't sell a ecdysteroid supplement, anything with any ecdysteroid products. It's largely formulation is my thing. So on the academic end, I went to undergrad for nutrition. At this time is when I started the first supplement company. Realized that I really was a lot more interested. I knew even back then. I'm 36 now. I was 18, early 20s. Then I knew I wanted to make supplements. It was just very fascinating to me, kind of the mystique and the chemistry, and basically how multidisciplinary supplements are was very fascinating to me. So I decided I was going to go to grad school. I went for sports nutrition, thinking that that would give me more answers, typically because the industry is called the sports nutrition industry. And I always thought, as a fallback, I'd like to work for an athletic team as a nutritionist if the supplement thing didn't work out. And then started De Novo, started growing. And after I had formulated products, a few successful ones, I think I realized that admittedly, I stumbled into creating these formulas by being my own lab rat, like taking so many ingredients and seeing through experience what worked and what didn't, keeping notes, but not really being able to explain it from a physiological perspective of why these things work, to the point where I could kind of predict something would work before I had to experience it. So I wanted a more refined approach. So I went back again for a master's degree in pharmaceutical chemistry. And it's largely geared towards pharmaceutical drug development, but a lot of it is discussing pharmacology, drug development, basically everything that, if the supplement industry operated in a perfect world, kind of the steps that would go through. So basically, like, if you want to first discover a new drug and then test, like, how you go through the clinical phases of testing it, making sure it works, making sure it's safe, then releasing it to market. So basically, it was my way of, like, okay, this is more than is required in the supplement industry, but also if I wanted to get into pharmaceutical drug making, it would give me the option for that. So I'm not good at giving short answers.
That's perfectly fine. Yeah, sure. And I think something also noteworthy is that you do, in fact, try to innovate the supplement market a bit. I found clips with you saying something like De Novo Nutrition was basically founded on the idea of taking a supplement which already worked, and then actually trying to make it better or more efficient in some type of way. So I think this also applies a bit maybe to the whole ecdysteroid and turkesterone thing, that you do know what you're talking about. And if it was promising, I think you would already have, maybe, I don't know, tried to jump into it a bit and see what it does.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, take creatine, for example. Like, we sell a creatine product. Like, if if something gets to a point where it's undeniable, of course, we'd be foolish as not just someone in science, but a business person. I'd be the dumbest business person alive to not get in on that, right? So I think the way that we function as a relatively smaller company compared to these marketing machines is we need to be innovative, we need to be unique, and we need to try to be a step ahead on the launch of a lot of these kind of novel or innovative products. And that's how I've been able to survive for the past really decade. So what I'm really getting at is I do think it speaks volumes that we haven't released one, and we don't anticipate releasing an ecdysteroid product in the near future, because it's just so far ahead of what really anything in the science or mechanistically our understanding of it goes. Like, the only really avenue you have to base your marketing on and go heavy into saying they're anabolics is animal data. And there's a lot of things that we can show in animals that we have not been able to replicate in humans.
Yeah, I think, well, I wanted to also start with asking, well, at what point is it relatively safe to say that a supplement does show some promising potential? Because, of course, trying to wait until enough research comes out is going to take a long time. But if we do want to, well, sort of jump the gun on supplements, what would convince you, and what would maybe should well be guidelines as to deciding whether a supplement is worth it or not?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think hopefully I do a good job of illustrating some good logic for people to make better supplement decisions within my answer to that question. So I'll start by saying, the pharmaceutical industry as we know it is really only about 100 years old. Before that, we based a lot of medicine on plants, on natural medicinal products, and that is a deep, rich history, talking thousands of years. It goes back to ancient Chinese medicine, and it's so rich. You could call it ethnobotany, or pharmacognosy would be the academic discipline, which is basically plant medicine. So we still utilize plants even today to find what are called leads in the pharmaceutical industry. So let's just take opiates, for example. Like, we know that opium was the drug of abuse prior, and one of the opiates, one of the compounds in opium is morphine. There's many others like hydrocodone. Those are all parts. Those are all compounds within the opium poppy. So this existed well before drug companies existed. There was morphine. There was now there wasn't fentanyl and these stronger derivatives, but that's typically what a drug company is looking to do. Is let's collect these specimens from these known natural medicinal plants. Let's run them through an analysis where we can try to predict, because now we use computers in predicting drug-like effects. Let's run them through, see what kind of hits we get that seem to work on this pathway we're trying to target. And then let's see if we can make them better. Better, I put in quotations for a very, very specific reason. So really what they're trying to do is either make them more potent, or with what they say at the surface is make them safer. So that was the intent with something like fentanyl, is make it more potent, potentially safer. I'm going to hold back on going down that major rabbit hole to try to stay on task here. But oftentimes my process, and it could be my bias from going through the pharmaceutical chem program, but that's kind of what I'm looking at when I'm trying to find a new lead for a supplement. Is let me first consult the human, let's just say, the human database of plant compounds. Like, I have encyclopedias of natural and medicinal compounds. I have a lot of books that span anywhere from psychedelics to things that are used, like plant compounds that have been used for centuries for healing purposes. And I'll look and see what are the active components within that plant. Is it something that's been overlooked or just underutilized? And then if I find something then I'll go into sourcing it. I'll go into seeing if there's any human studies, and I'll try to actually find out, is there a mechanism for how this works? And oftentimes, because a lot of academia survives on publishing papers, there's an unbelievable wealth of information on plant products out there. So I can usually find something if it's not totally some totally exotic plants that no one's found. But you'd be surprised, because there's so much potential for profit in finding a new lead or a new plant medicinal compound. Of course, there's a lot of universities and a lot of institutions that are very vested in this path. So to try to kind of go back through that and highlight the key points, I'm looking for things that have been used in humans as natural medicinal products, like botanicals, and I'm trying to see if there's anything in the cultural or the folk use of them that seems to line up with what I'm trying to do. And then I will look to try to find either mechanistic papers or human trials to see if it validates and backs that up. And if there's no human one, I need at least a mechanism where they will have studied in either an animal or an isolated model to see this purified compound works definitively on this pathway. It either activates it or blocks it, and this is what happens. And then from there, if there's nothing else in the humans, then I'll trial it myself and see. So there has to at least be something. I'm not just making something up in my kitchen where I'm just pouring powders together and like, I got it. You know what I mean?
So you were talking about the mechanistic side of things, and or human trials, which I think are the main two points, besides, of course, knowing if there is any old anecdotal advice. So with the mechanistic side, a lot of people are talking about the fact that it binds to estrogen receptor beta, as you're well aware. But is there a strong reason to believe that this actually does anything, at least at the side of muscle growth? And well, not just in rat models, but also in humans.
We don't have anything to back up that I've seen. I'm sure every company who's marketing these would jump and be promoting it if a human study has come out. So I'd say I'm overwhelmingly confident that there's nothing out there right now. As of right now, the basis that everybody's decisions are made for pushing with human trials, these ingredients it's just 2 studies. The more recent one did show effects, but it does have some kind of methodological flaws. And the older one, I think it was 2006, which actually had much better research design and methodology, showed nothing, no benefit. Funny enough, the ecdysteroid group in that study lost lean body mass. Now, it wasn't statistically significant, but I find that pretty fascinating. And the interesting part is the study was funded by a grant from Muscle Tech, a company that, they're not as prominent now as they were then, but still a pretty huge player in the field. And that, they want these things to work. So I think that does speak even a lot more volumes. Let me kind of go back a little bit just to talk about ecdysteroids, what they are, what we know they do actually do. So they're basically insect steroids, or as I've called them before, bug drugs. And they are steroids by classification. So an anabolic steroid has 4 rings, A, B, C, D rings in its structure. And so basically, if you were to try to visualize it, you'd imagine 3 hexagons connected together and then 1 pentagon. And that's the core of a steroid structure, or an anabolic steroid. And basically what makes the difference, the distinction between something like testosterone or estrogen or 1-testosterone or any of these, both lab-made and human-made anabolic steroids, is what groups kind of come off that core structure, that core ringed structure. So what we do know, and no one has made claims, is that ecdysteroids, including turkesterone, do not work like anabolic steroids. So anabolic steroids work by binding to the androgen receptor. We know that that's not happening with ecdysterone or turkesterone or any of the, like 200 ecdysteroids that exist.
Which is why it's supposedly better than steroids, because it don't have any side effects. But
another fascinating kind of claim in and of itself. So the reality is we have no real good explanation for what the studies have shown. The rat studies seem to suggest that turkesterone particularly, but ecdysterone as well, bind to a subclass of estrogen receptor called the estrogen receptor beta. The issue with that is we have no real evidence that estrogen receptor beta produces any of the effects that people claim are happening from ecdysteroids. Like genistein, which is a soy isoflavone, is a very potent, it's actually one of the most potent estrogen receptor beta agonists we know. And you don't see people pumping up soy protein. You see the opposite.
Yeah, they avoid it.
Yeah, and that's a well-known estrogen receptor beta agonist. So what's fascinating, and this will be the last segue I do, is when you're looking into a proposed mechanism of either a natural product or a lab-made product, a drug, you can either do it the long and hard way, which is, basically co-incubate it, find out if it binds, you take out the receptor from, some kind of animal or something, and you see if it binds. But the quicker way is you do a screen, it's called in silico. So you use a computer to screen what the likely receptors are that this compound would interact with based upon all of the other known interactions of other compounds and receptors. So you can do this with turkesterone. And ironically, there are hits of what receptors turkesterone may bind with, and the number one hit is TNF alpha, which has nothing to do with anabolism. It's actually it's something that promotes the immune response the inflammatory response when you activate it, and you actually get a score of the probability as well. And even at TNF alpha, like imagine that bar is 100, it's like 15-20% specific for it. And if you have to go down like 30 hits in the list to even see any steroid receptors listed. So I think even if it is making that interaction, it is just not that potent as we'd like it to be. We're basically grasping at straws.
Yeah, I think it's also interesting to note that we do sort of know that ecdysterone binds to estrogen receptor beta, but is there even a strong reason to believe that, turkesterone does the same thing?
So, like I said, structurally, there's a reason. There are these structural characteristics that we know give compounds what's called specificity to a certain receptor. So let's just say certain things coming off the compound that make them stick stronger to certain receptors. So if you want to make a really anabolic steroid, you have to have what's called a keto group on the A ring. So it's an oxygen that's attached to the third carbon on the first ring. And you also want to have a double bond in the second ring. Most of our strongest anabolics we know that have that structure have that structural characteristic as well. The keto group and the double bond in the B ring, I believe it is, B or A ring. Now, if you want to bind more specifically to the estrogen receptor, you have to have an OH in that 3 carbon position, and then another spaced out OH somewhere else in the structure. So that's why, if anybody's aware of kind of endocrinology, that's why if you look at the structure on paper of testosterone and estrogen, they look pretty similar to the layman. But if you look on that third carbon, you'll see testosterone has a keto group in the C3, estrogen has a hydroxyl group in OH. So we know that you need that structure for any type of binding to ER. Now, ecdysterone and turkesterone both have that. they do have the hydroxyl C3. But what's interesting is something like I said, genistein has a much higher potency than any of the known ecdysteroids we have. So it doesn't seem that it structurally has the things that it needs to be valid for what it's being claimed for. And even if it did, kind of like you're saying, it doesn't really, and like estrogens are not associated with really muscle anabolism. Maybe muscle protection, but not muscle anabolism.
Yeah, the only thing I've heard about is that it supposedly increases estradiol. I think also the main guy selling this supplement, Derek Moore, Placebo or Dates, he commented that also on your post. But when I looked into these studies, there's basically only about 1 or 2 that I could find. And it was only in rat models or rodents. So
it's a stretch. It's a stretch to make those claims. And I mean, again, like let's just take this completely out of the scientific context. Let's look at culture, like within common practice, off-label use of anabolics. How many people are stacking estrogen with their testosterone? Do you hear of any bodybuilders doing that?
No, yeah, there's like, about 0.
Exactly. So like practically, if we said, let's not even look at the studies, practically we know no bodybuilders do this in practice. Like if there was really something there, don't you think people whose money and livelihood depended upon it would be stacking estrogen with their anabolics? Like,
yeah, that's something I wanted to touch as well, because I know you trained athletes.
Yeah, so I still coach.
Yeah, you still coach. So would you even consider, well, advising it to your clients, or are you just like, well, it's basically just a lot of mumbo jumbo trying to placebo effectively?
You mean ecdysteroids, right?
Yes.
So my position right now is, and I think this is why marketing preys upon it so well, is I can't take the definitively no stance. I could take the improbable stance, is the one I'm most comfortable with, but I can't definitively say they are useless. They're most likely not useful, but I can't say they're useless. I think there's, again, I'll try to focus on the practical here. I think there's some issues with just buying an ecdysteroid supplement and believing what you're told. The first being, if you're going to buy them, you should know that you're getting turkesterone or ecdysteroids. The best way to know that without hiring a lab, without having a lab or lab equipment, is look at the label. If it's being sold as like 90% or above, like a high purity ecdysteroid supplement, it should be a white powder. It shouldn't be brown. It shouldn't really be off-white. If not, you're not getting what you're told. Funny enough, the more recent study shows that these products that they used in the study were not nearly the potency that they were labeled as. So I think if you're going to buy them, you should really first know that. And if you can't find that, ask the manufacturer to produce something that says it's potent, and that shows it. The second is, what we do have from the two human studies and all of the animal studies that precede them is that they do seem to be safe. So it's not likely that someone's going to hurt themselves taking ecdysteroids. Again, not likely that you're going to get benefit either. So I think it comes down to how much can you justify financially that a shot in the pan, a shot in the dark is worth it for you. My argument would be, if you're really looking for that edge, for any type of product that really works, that is worth your money, it's hard to beat creatine. Like it's undefeated right now.
The funny thing is that I know someone that actually he knows a friend that basically stopped taking creatine because it supposedly caused baldness, but instead
that's what my problem is.
Yeah. Yeah. although there is almost, well, not really much evidence supporting that idea, but well,
Let me touch on that really quick because I think it's
yeah.
fascinating, and I've heard that case before as well. It's like, there's this one study, or I don't even know what it is. I don't know if it's unpublished, but there's a data set that shows that creatine increases DHT. So the issue with that is, if you took 20 guys that have a full head of hair and 20 that are completely bald, you will have varying DHT levels in both. So the issue is really that individual sensitivity to the DHT, and we're not even fully convinced that DHT is the end all be all for hair loss either. So let's say that it increased your DHT. Well, we have tons of bald guys with high or normal DHT that have full heads of hair. The only thing that we know, and the root of that association, was because I don't know how long ago, like probably 100 or plus years ago, is when they castrated men to keep their voices artificially high in like the church or choir. They found that they never went bald. So that's kind of where we've built this whole thesis upon. So yeah, I mean, if you really want to keep your hair, you could go down that route. I wouldn't recommend castration, but I don't think creatine is causing or accelerating hair loss. I think it's basically, you need to choose better parents if you want to keep your hair.
And the funny thing about that one is that same guy, well, he's now starting Turkesterone because he heard all of sorts of things about it. But I'm thinking, like, man, if you would do research on creatine and hair loss, you would immediately think, well, yeah, there's not too much reason to believe that it does in fact cause hair loss. But you also then decide to take Turkesterone, which has no research supporting it whatsoever. So yeah, I just thought it was a very funny thing to note, because it's kind of getting to that absurdity of, well, anecdotal advice really overpowering basically everything we know of these compounds.
I mean, I think what keeps the wheels sort of, or the gears churning, is that belief, where you want to believe that we've broken through, that we've figured it out, we found a way to hack, which is a very popular verb that's used, physiology. And number one, the reason we're here still, and we're able to talk and humans have survived, is probably because we haven't been able to hack physiology, and it's evolution has figured things out better than, like, to know that our brain and central nervous system doesn't need to know all of that stuff or be involved in it to survive and thrive. And I think if you want to look for cases where we have found that let's just say diamond, kind of diamond in the rough, or needle in the haystack, it's been something like a creatine. And even that, yes, it has the most human data, the most support for being performance enhancing, but it's not, mind blowing. And pretty much anybody in the industry, maybe I was thinking they'd admit, if you put a gun to their head, they'd probably admit, we haven't been able to outdo creatine in terms of muscle building potential, legal, naturally occurring endogenous substances. So I think it's highly unlikely that we will find something that's better. But there's, if in 2 years someone listens to this, there will be something new. And then it's weird. Like, I remember people talking about ecdysteroids when I first got into supplements, like 15-ish years ago. So it just kind of keeps cycling. It's just, you need to have the hype machine, continue to go.
Yeah, I think that especially when considering the fact that even then, well, if you're going to use anecdotal evidence as your main argument, which a lot of people do, I think it's notable to say, well, during the first hype wave around 2006, well, there wasn't really too much evidence to even, well, jumpstart the actual research aside from one study. So it doesn't really even seem that effective. when considering anecdotal advice. But I think right now it's just so overblown because, well, Derek from More Plates, More Dates, he made a video literally comparing it to Dianabol and, well, sort of saying it has the same effects of it. And it's a bit extreme.
The irony is, why wouldn't every person who uses Dianabol just come off Dianabol then?
Yeah.
Or active.
And I think the funniest thing is actually that most people describing their effects of taking these supplements are basically perfectly describing a placebo effect, like increased energy, being able to do more reps, while in reality you should probably see some other things happening besides just that, because the whole premise of my YouTube video is going to be, well, that it does work, but only because it's a placebo.
Sure.
And I think, yeah, the hype is just so big that everyone...
What you explained is exactly why you can't have a proper research study without a placebo group. Because we know that the placebo effect exists. You can give someone rice pills and they can get better gains than the group given nothing. I mean, I've even seen that in our own pilot trials with supplements. Is like in the past, we had a sleep supplement that usually I'll test it in myself, then I'll pilot it and, you know, try to get 20 plus people, and I placebo control it. And I had a lot of hits on the placebo group. I had the best sleep of my life. I woke up, I felt amazing. And then I was like, man, you took psyllium husk. Like, so yeah, it exists. And, you know, the mind is a huge factor in performance, and one that can't be ruled out, but one that needs to be recognized and factored in.
Yeah. So one thing I do wanted to touch is, well, the Derek from More Plates, More Dates, he also mainly cited one Russian study looking at rats and basically finding that turkesterone does seem to be more potent when looking at anabolics, even than comparing it to Dianabol. But all these, well, this one Russian study was done by the same guy who also wrote about 10 or even more studies on turkesterone and ecdysteroids. Don't you think there would be maybe some sort of bias that could influence the results, or is that maybe a bit too conspiracy theory?
Well, I mean, yeah, I think that's certainly a possibility. But I think a practical way to look at other reasons why that just because they're shown to be effective in animals does not necessarily apply to humans, is that, you know, number one, there's enormous numbers of drugs that are effective in human trials, or I'm sorry, effective in animal trials. Then you go to first in human and they just don't work and they get bailed on. And we're not talking about supplement industry budgets. We're talking about 5 million to 20 million that pharmaceutical companies have dumped in a vested interest in launching this as a pharmaceutical. And we know of many animal and many common ingredients in animals that seem to produce tumors and do things that don't happen in humans. Like a big thing with artificial sweeteners is like, oh, well, they loaded this rat on aspartame and it grew liver cancer or something. Well, they have a different method of metabolizing that compound than humans do. You know, you need to account for those genetic differences. So there's a reason that, yeah, you will test in animals first before you go to humans, but there's also a very, very good reason why you don't just test in animals and say, okay, it's great, let's put it on the market. So it's, unless he's selling supplements to rats, then
there's no reason
too inappropriate a jump. You do need to have something in humans that's somewhat documented. Like I said, you know, sure, maybe it's not a published trial, but is there something in the, the folk use of this, in the cultural use, in the historical use of this. And yeah, we do have, like, there are reports, because ecdysteroids and these plants, the main one that turkesterone comes from, it's a Juga turkestanica, I think it's called. That's been around for a long time, but it's not, like, it's not used, or hasn't been used to make jacked, like, Uzbekistani bodybuilders.
Yeah.
That's where it grows. People use it as like liver tonics and like very generic general health things, because they don't know. Like, that's why the historical use is usually a broad thing of, like, we'll call it an adaptogen, or we'll call it a liver tonic, or we'll call it a skin tonic. And it's not that we haven't generated good leads from those things, but it's just that it's not just a jump. It is a major leap to say, these things are anabolic in rats. That means they are super anabolic in humans.
And even then, in rats, well, I think a lot of the studies seem very shady to me. They're not really done in well-established labs or anything like that. So to me, it really looks like, well, you're using that very loose conclusion from one Russian study specifically. Then you're making the very loose conclusion that, well, maybe it binds to estrogen receptor beta, and then you, while not really establishing any mechanism whatsoever, you're basically concluding that, well, this must work for humans, even though we do have, well, one really quality study and one other less quality study on humans with ecdysteroids, basically already giving you not really a definite conclusion, but pointing slightly to the fact that maybe this isn't really what we think that it is.
Well, and the reality is, even the 2 human studies we have, they're not more dramatic than the effects of anabolic steroids. So it's still an inappropriate claim, even if you want to look at what we have, in humans. I get it. People want to get over that edge. As a business owner, I realize, what people want to make a purchase and what drives. Basically, the idea is, you kind of got to sugar the pill. You got to say a good story that gets someone over the hump of resistance, which ironically, that initial resistance is logic, is people, I think, being skeptical for good reason. But I think that story told by someone who I think has people's attention and respect enough that he speaks of technical things very fluidly in a way that's convincing. I think when he says that, people are like, oh, well, damn, it worked. It worked in rats. It's
He
worth
used magic words, so it must be true.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a big part of success in the industry. And it's certainly an easy way to make a quick buck, or a large scale dollar. So I think, at the end of the day, it does depend on your angle for it. But I do think it hurts the industry, and I think it hurts the individual, because that's why supplements have always had a black eye. Is, people realize, since the supplement industry has existed, there's been, snake oil being sold.
Yeah.
And I also think that it hurts people from ever getting the truth. Now, oftentimes the truth isn't that sexy and that sellable, but I do think, even for myself, speaking from my own experience, what got me into supplements at an early age was getting pissed off that, like, the lies were really appealing and I wanted to believe them. And I was like, why are they telling me I'll gain 10 pounds in 12 weeks from a jar that is 80% table sugar and creatine monohydrate. And you want to believe it, and you want to spend $60 in GNC on it and stuff like that. So obviously I'm infusing a lot of personal elements into it, but yeah, the point is, I think people should really tune into that skepticism and ask more questions. And there's more and more brands that are I think meeting the demand for that and pushing things forward. where if people do have those questions, for example, we have lab tests available. We do more testing than people even ask for and expect. But it's because we want to be that change. We want to represent that change. There are ways to make quicker and easier dollars, but I want to exist in the industry that I wish I had as a 20 something.
Yeah, I think, well, the main problem for me is that just I see all these videos of, well, people having transformations from turkesterone, and they do the thing where you don't flex anything at all in one photo, and then suddenly you flex everything up as hard as you can, and you look 10 times bigger, and always, instead of, well, just trying to give objective information, you can always find an affiliate link in their description. Like, if you're really trying to give an objective view, maybe don't try to bring any financial thing into this, because you're also, in my opinion, placeboing yourself into thinking, well, I want to make money of this, so it should work, and if it does work, I'm going to promote it. But, well, the one thing comes from another. You're going to feel like you actually gain something because you also want to get that money, because everyone is getting rich of this one supplement.
Yeah, there's ulterior motives, kind of baked into it, and it is a problem. And this is true across every industry. Even the ones that we look at as the purists, like even in academia, money clouds good research and good science. So it is an imperfect world, but I think all we can do is our individual part. So unfortunately, I think I love having the conversation. I love the possibility that this will reach as many people as possible. But at the same time, I realize it could just be an echo chamber of other people who think like us, and then we're just the minority who's just waving our fists at
Well, I think Jeff Nipper did make a solid video about it, but he mainly looked at some available studies, and I think most of the hype comes from the mechanistic side of the supplement. So I don't think his reach really convinced a lot of people, which is why I think I should make this video. And I also hope that a lot of people watching this do come to the same conclusion, that maybe it's not worth spending about $50 on a very shady supplement.
And that's the other thing, and I can give another perspective on, what the raw material of this product probably costs. And it is not, to make that bottle of pills, I can guarantee you it is less than $10, possibly even less than $5 to make that.
And to me, it looks like they're just trying to get a big cash grab before, well, everything comes down, when there do come some studies that show it probably doesn't really do much.
That's the issue as well, is it inappropriately puts the burden of proof on the wrong place, which is, it's really not the scientist's job to validate something before you sell it as a supplement. It should be, when it comes out scientifically, then supplement companies can market it. Like, we kind of have it backwards. It's almost like imagine if you're guilty until proven innocent, right?
Yeah.
Like it's almost like law.
Like saying, I believe there is a pink flying elephant around, and you have to prove me that it doesn't exist.
Exactly.
And I think the saddest part about it is that basically we sort of have to put money into this while not really gaining anything from proving them wrong, and they're not going to put money into this because they're potentially digging their own grave. So
that would be the most fascinating. And you know what, to that end, I say, kind of kudos to Muscle Tech for throwing some money at it, actually. And I'd be a lot more impressed if the company selling it actually did fund some studies. I can tell you, if we were making that large a profit margin, we would definitely be having someone study it, and going deeper in, outside of just me, in a little tiny lab. with very, very rudimentary instrumentation. Um, so yeah, I think again, these are all very logical red flags, and you hope that people pick up on them. If not, like I said, the simplest thing you can do is read the label. Like, look at the label, open the pill, look at what you're taking. Like I said, a very easy surrogate marker of purity is, the overwhelming majority of supplement ingredients, unless it's like I'm trying to like berberine would be yellow. Unless it's a known colored compound, it's gonna be white. It's gonna be a pure white powder.
Yeah.
Um,
I've also tried to look for some ecdysterone supplements containing, well, clearly brown powder, and the reviews are still, exactly the same, positive, reporting energy increase and such. So I think that already sort of proves the point that it's probably a placebo. Um,
Interesting. You just reminded me of something as well. Is they looked at in the latest human study, I forget, like it was 2018 or something, they did do hormone profiling, and they actually showed that it didn't even increase, any of it didn't alter the hormone profile, IGF-1, anything like that. So again, what would be earth shattering is we have found something that seems to defy all the known pathways of anabolism to produce these effects. It just seems like it would rewrite a lot of our understanding of human physiology.
Yeah. I also wanted to sort of briefly look at the two studies. We've already covered them a bit, but because the latest one, which found a positive effect, well, it only contained about 6% of the labeled dosage. So it's already clear to me, but I think it's important to ask again. Do you think that this probably is a big reason to believe that it was a false positive, basically?
Yeah, I think that's, well, that tied into the fact that their body composition analysis was BIA. It wasn't DEXA,
Yeah.
so it's not even, it's not even a well accepted gold standard measure of body composition
Yeah.
changes, whereas the original study was DEXA.
But they also increased strength, which is something I think also a lot of people noted. Because, of course, well, if you're not sure about the muscle mass, you can, well, sort of look at strength and see a sort of correlation. And they did see a significant increase in strength. But also something I think was noteworthy is that they used subjects with only about 1 year of training experience, and I think that at that point you're going to have a lot of variance in
Sure.
everyone, because someone may be doing a bro split for all their training, someone could have done proper training for all you know. So yeah.
Beyond that, though, what you have, and this is a well-known phenomenon, is the individualization of response to training, and that's the issue with having a small sample size, is you just can't mute out that effect, or you can't normalize, would be the statistical way to say it. It's harder to normalize the distribution in that. So and this isn't really a fault of the researchers. It's just something that's sort of inherent to small sample size, low funded studies that are resistance training based, is you don't know, you can't really look at somebody and say that's a hyper responder. You can guess based upon how muscular they are coming in, and certain criteria, but it's still a guess. And it's very possible that you could have captured a couple hyper responders in your group, and it looks like there's a much larger effect on strength than there actually is, because you didn't have a well distributed sample size of low, non, mid, high responders. And that's the strength in numbers. When you have 100, 200, 300 subjects, now you're going to get a more normalized curve.
Yeah, exactly. And also, I wanted to briefly go back to the fact of increased energy and reps that most people report. is there even a reason to believe that ecdysterone and specifically turkesterone does this, or is there really no relationship between those two?
So it's hard to say. I mean, if you take some of the subjective criteria from things like TRT, like bringing someone back within the normal range who's low or subnorm of testosterone, you will typically hear those anecdotal reports, or that subjective feedback is, I feel like I have more energy, I feel younger, I feel blah, blah, blah. But the issue is, it's not doing that. It's not increasing testosterone. You know, if, to my knowledge, there are no known relationships with neurotransmitters or anything else that could potentially explain that effect. But again, like, that is an absolute dark spot.
That's a big stretch.
Yeah, exactly. That's a huge stretch that even the companies who are selling it aren't marketing it as. So I think it's highly, highly unlikely. I think it's more so people making that association that it's ... steroid, and this is what I'm supposed to get from steroids, so therefore I feel it.
I think the name turkesterone also really attributes a lot to the hype, because it is very similar to testosterone.
And I think, it's interesting that there's legally, like, what that is being done is perfectly legal, but it's just the chemistry naming system, because they fit that classification of steroid. So that's usually the somewhere in the name, like oid, androstane, something like that is usually the name of these structures. But there's a lot of other steroidal structures in plants that no companies are selling just because it has steroidsterone in it.
And would you say it's possibly similar to testosterone, or is it just ecdysteroids are also steroids for plants, but not necessarily that turkesterone is comparable to the human steroid version testosterone? Because I've also seen a lot of people say that turkesterone is basically the plant equivalent to testosterone, but I think because it's a plant steroid.
So what's funny, yeah, it's plant generated. It is a plant produced steroid. Again, like I said, there are many. Genistein it doesn't have the 4 rings, but diasgenin is one. That is a soy-based or a yam-based plant steroid. There's many of them. People could Google it and look them up. There's many. The point is that it is plant synthesized, true. However, it doesn't produce those typical responses of anabolic steroids, even in plants or insects, like it does in humans. Like, yeah, in insects, so insects have an ecdysone receptor, and that's why ecdysteroids do have effects in insects. But it also controls molting, and it controls reproduction. Humans don't molt. You don't have, we don't possess that receptor. So, if you're trying to make that jump, unless you're molting, I mean, I don't think it's going to be that practical or that relevant for you. And to my knowledge, there are no known human cases of having an ecdysone receptor, and that would be very odd if it did pop up. So, yeah, I'm even trying to find an explanation or some type of logic for it, and I can't even make that stretch. So yeah.
And also, because there is really no scientific research, I think there is also something to be said about the dosage of the supplement, because I hear a lot of them who are selling the supplement say, more does seem to be better, but I think it's also a bit too incentivized, because you're basically paying double the amount that you normally would, because you're taking twice as much.
There's multiple issues with that. So I'll go back to one of the things that you said, which was very, very important for people to realize is, the dose, or the study that did say that they're effective had significantly less to dose. So that's a major stretch. That even makes, the alarm bells go off that much more, is like, it's not even the dose that they're saying, and it has a more prominent effect than a study that was dose controlled and seemingly appropriately dosed and showed no effect. But it all sort of is centralized around the concept of dose, and dose is incredibly important in everything. And in toxicology, there's a phrase from like an 18th century physician named Paracelsus, which is, the dose makes the poison. And that's true. Like, you can take something extremely poisonous and toxic, and if you dose it small enough, it won't kill you, it's not toxic. It can be a medicine. That's true of Botox. People inject Botox into their face when it's actually the most toxic substance known to man. So we need to, cover that part first. But secondly, what I'd say, and why that phrase, or that axiom, or however you want to describe it, applies here on the other end of the spectrum, is you need to be careful with the knowledge that I said ecdysteroids are safe. They're safe at known dosages, at studied dosages. We don't know if you double or triple that it's going to be safe. So you are becoming now a case study in N of 1. And like, again, this is an extreme scenario, but there's toxic dose of water, something that's essential for survival. So when you get into dose escalation, you are kind of reaching uncharted territory. And there's a low possibility that maybe you'll find something that we haven't yet, but there's also a high possibility that you're going to find something that is unintended, that you didn't want to find. And that's a well-known thing of plant compounds, especially, is when you go pretty high on dosage ranges, side effects are, nausea, vomiting, a lot of stuff. Like, you're not going to go and just munch down all the grass in front, like, you know what I mean, and think like it's going to be completely benign. So yeah.
Yeah, I think that explains it very well, because I personally do sort of fear having some sort of side effects. So combining that with the fact that an increase in muscle mass because of the supplements is already highly unlikely, in my opinion, and not knowing if it's actually truly safe, because the safety is also, as far as I know, mostly in animals, and not entirely in humans, because we only have 2 human studies, and also those studies, one of those didn't really have a proper dosage. So I think this should warn people that maybe the trade-off, risk and potential upside, isn't really even worth it.
So I think this, because I do want to always try to bring it back to practicality. If there is somebody listening who's using or is going to do it and going to decide to do that, just to be their own lab rat and say, okay, I'm going to use 10x the dose. If you're deciding on doing that and you want to do it in the smartest way you can, you should have pre-blood work done, and then blood work after a week or 2 of doing it, because there are many things, and this is probably one of the most well-known thing about plant compounds, especially when you go on extreme dosage, and is you're taking them orally. That means they have to pass through the liver first before they get it into systemic circulation. We even know with vitamins, they can really throw off liver enzymes when you're going to extreme dosages. So if someone is really hell-bent on doing that, at the very least, it's called a CMP, complete metabolic panel. Have your doctor write it, I don't care, but just do it. At least be as safe as you can doing it. Don't be totally reckless, because that has been shown. Like one, and I apologize, I'm going really on a tangent here, but there's a pretty well-known herbal anxiolytic compound called kava kava, actually pretty effective, an ingredient that we looked at putting in products in the past, and the reason that we avoided it, and the reason it's still kind of avoided as a supplement, is there are cases of liver failure from it. Now, I'm not saying that's going to happen. I'm not saying this is a kava kava, but kava kava is a natural plant compound. this can happen from herbals. They are not completely safe because they're natural.
Yeah, and I think also if you're going to buy it, try to buy it from at least a more established company, because there are just, it's not that uncommon, even though some people claim that it's uncommon. It's not really that uncommon for people to smuggle in some other anabolic substances into their supplements.
Like we've been talking about the whole time, burden of proof. I mean, the other big part is a lot of times many companies, especially smaller companies, will rely on the industry to watchdog them. That, like, you can't really stop somebody from putting rice powder in a supplement and selling it until it goes to a lab, it gets tested, and they verified it as rice powder, and then they go after the company. So it's not great. I think a lot of general population, general public people use that to say all supplements are bad and evil and lies. And it kills me to acknowledge that is the truth of it. But I think what it really means is you just need to be a more savvy consumer, ask more questions, and dig a little deeper before giving somebody your hard-earned money. Hard-earned money.
Yeah, I was especially that because I think even if you wanted to increase your results substantially, I think your money is probably better spent on actually proper coaching, because often most of these people taking these supplements, they're just doing some random workout they found on Instagram or on diet, which also is a big part of your results. And if you already spend your money, which is about $30 to $50 a month on that, I think you're going to see way better results than trying to find the new best supplement and betting that this one will work and eventually will losing all your money on gambled supplements.
Yeah, with nothing to show for it. Not even more gains.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, of course, as you said, if you're really trying to get ahead of competition, I can see the, well, attractiveness of trying this supplement. But I think for most people in the general public who are just trying to get a bit bigger, to lift a little more weight, I think it's not worth it. But I think we did answer all the questions that I had. So if you wanted to maybe add something you thought would be important, or do you think we've already basically said everything?
I think we covered a lot of ground. I think if anybody has made it this far, it's congratulations to them.
Yeah.
This is a long form. Long form is my preference anyway.
Yeah. I
No,
will definitely cut down the video a bit to keep it in a shorter video, but I'll also upload the longer version separately.
no. I think from here, let feedback be your guide. I think if people have more questions, we can certainly discuss more at length, more specifically other things. But I think we've covered quite a bit of ground, and I'm satisfied if you are.
Yeah, sure. Just for the viewers who did end up watching the whole thing, where can we find some of your work for those interested? Because you are flying a little more under the radar than, for example, Eric Helms or someone like that. So yeah.
So I have a personal page on Instagram at Ben Esgro. I was posting some of the scientific content on there, and then I fully transitioned to the page that covers a lot more stuff that's relevant to this, which is called at Subsci. I would like to build it out more. The only issue is I have started coaching now semi full time, in addition to running the supplement company Elemental Formulations. So there's a lot on the plate. And the thing is, if we're talking time between paid clients and my business, and then doing, the free, fun content for myself on there and anybody who's interested, that's unfortunately always going to come last. So I always intend to keep posting. I do have a queue of content that I'd like to get to, but it just might not be as fast as people would like. So I'd say that. I'd say the website, it's elemental.fit. of my company. I'm a coach at the Strength Guys if people are interested in coaching and nutrition services. And then people could reach me directly on Instagram at Ben Esgro or at Subside.
All right, perfectly. I think that's basically it. Big thanks for coming on the channel, because it's really hard to reach out to someone knowledgeable on this topic. And I really appreciate the valuable information that I've got from this. And I think people watching this definitely have as well.
Sure. Yeah, it's my pleasure. And maybe the first of many. So yeah, just let me know, and happy to provide some insight in the darkness for people.
Yeah, definitely. I'll definitely contact you somewhere again. Maybe not in the near future, but definitely later on.
No hurry, man. It started with a random conversation, so you're welcome to start with a random conversation again.
Absolutely. All right. Have a very good rest of your day, and I hope you enjoyed it as well. And I'll talk to you later, I guess.
Yeah, man. Get some sleep. I know it's late there, so
yeah, it's around 3 a.m. right now, but it's worth it.
All right. Well, I appreciate you staying up late for me. We'll talk again soon.
Yeah. All right. See you. Bye bye.
Take it easy.